And I'm Guy, and this is your home for everything Alberta independence. Let's get into it.
Yes, before we start, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, please don't forget to subscribe. It really does help us out. Also, we try to read most, if not all, your comments live. However, we do pause the whole show for super chats, and those also really help us out as well. And we have memberships.
Absolutely. And I see we have a comment, and we have me waving there.
Yes, unfortunately, I can't bring up the comment from Bella Hewler, but says hi, joining from Alberta. Hello, and thank you for being here. And Austin Westwood, I can bring up your comment, says, Hola, Freedom Familia. Hola, thank you for being here.
Absolutely. And you don't have to say we can't bring up the comments. Sometimes we can, sometimes we can't, depending if the gear's working.
Yes, but it wasn't working right now. Okay, then that's it. So we can start with, is it breaking news?
Yeah, let's go into some breaking news. One of them is actually breaking news. The other one's kind of a sub-story or subcontext.
Extra, extra, read all about it. Extra, extra, read all about it.
Let's start with this from Keith Wilson saying, quote, Jack Mintz identifies one of the most troubling parts of the West Coast pipeline deal. BC may be allowed to charge Alberta Oil a special royalty just to cross its territory. How surprising. So Alberta produces the resource, pays the carbon costs, funds the pipeline, and then pays BC for permission to reach markets. Canada no longer works for Alberta, if it ever did, I would add in there.
Yeah, and this is only the beginning of the end here. If you agree to this pipeline, the last pipeline that went through there, they stopped all construction on the pipeline for renegotiations because there was other specialty groups that wanted in. And this is just talking about the easiest deal. And this is the West Coast pipeline. You're going through one province. Imagine that East Coast pipeline. If they're setting this kind of precedence with British Columbia, and this is just provinces that want a piece of the pie. The federal government is on a totally another level. These pipelines are going to be completely unprofitable at a certain point. It's the federal government that's investing all of that money.
And I would also say we have continuously been saying, yes, they're going to bring up some kind of pipeline deal or something to do with pipelines right before, in this case, the first non-binding referendum, but then the second one as well. You were saying yesterday that probably we won't get, there won't be any work started until that second binding referendum when and if when I would say it actually goes through. But this, I think, will be a great talking point, or they think it'll be a great talking point for them, saying, well, we're already giving you the pipelines. We're already helping you to be economically, so with your economics and everything you're complaining about with that. But it's not just that. Those are not just the reasons why Alberta wants to become independent.
Yeah, it seems like it's just empty promises for now, but he wants to make sure the MOU and everything's there. He thinks this is enough to ward off a non-binding referendum, and we need to hold their feet to the fire no matter what. I know a lot of people are going to be voting for independence, so we can get a better deal with Ottawa to send a message to Ottawa. But when that binding referendum comes around, if we're able to get past this non-binding referendum, Mark Carney and the federal government are going to want to make sure they have something in the bag to actually offer. They're going to want to get shovels in the ground at that point. But if it's not going to be enough the first time around, I highly doubt it's going to be enough the second time around. A lot of people in Alberta independence are wise to the scams they're playing, and we're kind of pulling their card already. We're starting to educate the public.
And next, from Eric Doherty says, quote, wow, Canada Prime Minister Mark Carney just came out and admitted Trump won the argument on NATO after 47, or Trump told them to stop reloading. The fake news is furious. He's now winning the argument. He's won the argument. Countries need to take more responsibility.
Well, and this isn't just Mark Carney coming out to say this. It was the head of NATO and a lot of leaders from other countries. They obviously want to make World War III out of Ukraine. Trump is trying to hold back on that as much as possible. That being said, they believe they can wait Trump out and kind of push him to the side as long as they're willing to go with the 5%. And they're going to need that 5%. They're going to need much more than that 5% in the long term, no matter what, even if they are able to succeed at their goal of expanding this war in Ukraine, which hopefully they're not. If it's J.D. Vance coming into office in 2028, I would say he's going to have the same tactics as Trump. He's not going to want to advance this thing. If it's anybody else, there is a chance. Even Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio is a former neocon, and I wouldn't be surprised if he would actually expand the war in Ukraine. He's only recently flipped to more of a MAGA base in order to, I think, establish his political career even more.
For a shift of the burden within NATO, that's appropriate. That is happening. That's gaining momentum. That's part of the point I made to President Trump when we spoke a few days ago, is that it's not just he's winning the argument, he's won the argument. Countries recognize that they need to take more responsibility, see the direct threats. Now, the question for NATO, and part of what we will discuss, and part of the point I will make in the room with my 3.5 minutes of time for a shift of the burden.
Yeah, and again, he's saying he's won the argument because the EU and Canada, all these countries, the globalists want war right now. Trump doesn't want war. He's trying to tell them they have to pull their own weight, and he wants to shift the responsibility onto them and off of the United States. He's slowly decoupling the United States from the European Union and NATO. We have more stories of that when we get to Alberta and the world. That being said, Mark Carney is doing the opposite. He's trying to couple Canada with the European Union and NATO even further.
Now even trying to insert Canada into Eurovision, which makes no sense. But again, we continuously see article after article and opinion piece after opinion piece talking about how Canada might be able to join the EU. Again, we've already discussed why that's not a great idea, but just furthering the point that clearly Canada wants to move further away from what the U.S. is intelligently doing, I would say.
Well, yeah, you don't want to get involved in the European Union's wars. Their manufacturing base has completely hollowed out to the United States and somewhat to China, but primarily to the United States because they have extremely high energy costs. The obvious move here would be to repair relations with Russia, get cheap energy flowing in again, rebuild their economy, rebuild their manufacturing base, and deregulate. Take a lot of the same tactics Trump has taken in the United States, and that's why manufacturing is flowing into the United States from all over the world, not just the EU, but the EU especially has been hollowed out. But even Mexico has good relations with the United States, and I believe it was yesterday we were talking about the Toyota plant relocating to the United States. They're about to build one of the biggest car manufacturing plants in the world.
Mm-hmm. But now let's go back into one comment and then into Alberta's Day Free. KP for you, hello, thank you for being here on RUMBLE. We are simulcasting or simul streaming, whatever you want to call it, on RUMBLE as well, and says Alberta independence, let's effing, I have to say, go. But yes, let's go as soon as possible, especially as we continue to talk about the disaster that Canada pushes itself to be.
Yeah, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about, because we were doing a conference call yesterday and they said it's fine to talk about it now. There's a telethon coming up, things like that.
Yes. Oh, you want? Oh, I don't know. I don't have that much information right now. I know there's a poster that's going to be coming out, and we will be talking about it further during the upcoming live streams once we get a bit more of the information.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be an all-day event, and it's going to be trying to support the major organizations that are within Alberta Independence. So when we get more information, we'll kind of talk about it more, but it will be coming up pretty soon, probably in the next 2 weeks or so.
Yes, third-party advertisers. That's what they're called. Okay, now let's go into Alberta Stay Free.
Sweet home Alberta, where the roots run deep and the money trees grow.
And let's start with, again, Keith Wilson saying, quote, annually, Alberta moves 30 billion of oil west through BC. BC moves 55 billion of BC's goods east through Alberta. If Ottawa accepts the idea that BC should be paid for Alberta's access to tidewater, it creates the obvious precedent Alberta can charge for BC's access to eastern markets.
Yeah, this is going to become a major issue, what's happening in these contracts. Everything that's tied up in the MOU with the federal government, but also what Danielle Smith is committing to when it comes to British Columbia. If we want access to Tidewater, we're going to have to pay them. Well, the obvious response would be if BC wants access to the rest of Canada, we're going to charge them. The problem there is the federal government is highly ideologically aligned with David Eby and British Columbia. This is another reason why Alberta needs independence, because if it has independence, this becomes a point of leverage, not a point of weakness for Alberta, and vice versa with the East Coast provinces wanting to get Tidewater to their big ally, China, on the West Coast.
Exactly. But next, hold on. There we are. Shaggy the One says, quote, if I could dispel one myth amongst those who are undecided about the upcoming referendum, it would be the fact that as much as some people might like it, it's impossible for us to join the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think he's going to address the concerns about the 51st state. And it's good that we're addressing these concerns again. It's kind of been shut down for a long time, but I think the Federalists are running out of talking points. If these big promises of pipelines that aren't really emerging, shovels aren't in the ground yet, we're paying back taxes on pipelines that are already in the ground based upon the new MOU, they're going to start resorting to the 51st state again. I would fully expect it. I'm really glad the United States has been smart enough to kind of stay out of it so they can't claim foreign interference. And this talking point hasn't come up, but it's good to cut it off at this point.
Yes.
Oh, Alberta's going to become the 51st state. No, we're not. And it doesn't matter if I wanted that, and I don't. It's not going to happen. And there's a very practical reason why it can't happen. In the United States, the Congress would have to vote to agree to bring in Alberta as the 51st state. Democrats would have to vote in favor of it, too, to get the required number of votes for the thresholds. However, the Democrats have been clear that they want Washington, D.C., which is currently not a state, and they want Puerto Rico, which is a territory and not a state, to become states. And so they would say, we will agree to Alberta becoming a state if you, the Republicans, agree to Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico becoming a state. Here's the problem that is obvious to anybody who studies the...
And I will say something here. If the Democrats get back in and they're going to desperately make their effort within the midterms and the 2028 election, they have already made it crystal clear they're going to pack the Supreme Court, number one. They're going to allow Puerto Rico in, and they're going to push for Washington, D.C. To come in as well so they can permanently keep out any future Republican president.
Mm-hmm.
Allocation of electoral power in the United States, which is Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico are blue. In other words, they're Democratic. And given the number of seats they would get in Congress, in the two houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives, it would distort the electoral power balance in the United States and could potentially preclude the Republicans from ever holding power again. So it's a complete non-starter. As much as President Trump likes to muse and say provocative things, the simple electoral math doesn't work. Alberta cannot become the 51st state, and those who are...
And you can leave it there. The Republicans play much more inside the lines. They're not going to pack the Supreme Court. They aren't going to try to make Alberta the 51st state. A matter of fact, Alberta as an ally directly to their north is far more of an advantage for the United States than actually having it part of the United States itself.
And also for Alberta itself, again, Alberta has been consistently voting conservative for the past 90-something years.
93 years.
Yeah, and in the U.S., it's either every 4 or 8 years you don't know what you get, and you can't fully trust in the rest of the citizenry of the U.S., number one, because it's so big, but also because it's just very different. And politically, you could end up being even more liberal and more insane, like the Biden era, than Canada is currently, I would say.
Yeah, well, having a
well, no, that would be saying too much.
Having a stable natural resource economy just to your north would suit the United States absolutely fine. Having an ideological extreme left-wing country like Canada to your north, I don't think is fine. And I think tensions are going to continue to grow. And that's why we're keeping an eye on it. And I'll say this, as the midterms come up, I'm going to focus more and more into the United States because it's going to have a huge impact on Alberta independence, especially with the timeline that's kind of emerging. We now have to win a non-binding referendum, then a binding referendum, then we have to go into negotiations. We're going to need a country to recognize us, but the 2028 American elections are going to come up at that point. So we also have to win that. The preferred candidate there is obviously J.D. Vance. Marco Rubio wouldn't be a bad second choice, but there are some things in his past that are a little bit questionable because his ideology has flipped so dramatically recently.
Just reminding me of, I'm pretty sure nobody here has ever watched or watches Mean Girls, but it reminds me of, Gretchen, stop trying to make the 51st state happen. It's not going to happen. Because we're going to be independent by ourselves. We don't need the U.S. Pocket Ace says, quote, the year 2015 will go down in the history books as the beginning of the end of Canada.
Well, and it seems like this is what the Canadian nationalists are trying to lean into, at least the first half of this video. And this is no longer what Canada is. But at the same time, they continue the destruction that's in the second half of this video. It's absolutely crazy, the tactics they're trying to use against Alberta independence. Let's take a look here. And it's absolutely crazy what under the Trudeau regime, that's where we started to really see the shift. And it's crazy what Canada was and what it's become. But Canada is still claiming to be one thing while it's walking a completely opposite path. At least that's the pitch they're giving to national Canadians inside of Alberta.
I also think, a lot of the people, Canada was essentially prepping its citizens since before then by bringing up this narrative of, oh, Canada's always so great, we're so gracious, we're kind, we always say sorry, we're better than the US, and then slow walking them, and now fast walking them, towards socialism and therefore ending towards communism. But I will say a lot of people didn't realize what was happening because they got complacent, they got comfortable. They started living in their suburbs or their bubbles, and they stopped really listening to outside sources and just listening or thinking that the mainstream news was still reliable enough for them to just pay attention to that. And that way you can propagandize a whole population and make them think that they're still living in that 2015 and prior era, when in reality it's been very different for very long, which is why I'm always almost amused by people in Canada using the argument against the US by saying, oh, but we have free healthcare. Number one, do you know how much you pay in taxes for that free healthcare? It's not free. And number two, you have the longest wait times in all of North America, even longer than the public system in Mexico, which is crazy to me that people still think that that is a reality.
Well, I remember going to school in Canada for a long time. I remember Terry Fox. I remember a lot of those things, and it really does warm your heart. The problem is that's not what Canada is anymore, but a lot of Liberals are still living in a bubble. Hopefully there's enough critical mass of people in Alberta that have woken up and can see through the lies, see through that part of Canadian history that the federal government has masterfully actually been able to erase by tearing down statues, changing names, taking away Canada Day through funding mechanisms, which we talked about yesterday. Jamil Javani did an excellent video talking about how they're erasing Canada Day through legislation and funding.
Stephen Jensen, thank you so much for the $2 super chat saying U.S. requirement 70% vote. Republican would stop D.C. and Puerto Rico.
Yeah, we're going to have to see a lot of things people say aren't going to be possible. It's not going to be possible to pack the Supreme Court either. The Democrats have made it absolutely clear they're going to pack the Supreme Court if they get back in power. That's one of the first things that they want to do. If they're able to do that, who knows what other mechanisms they're going to either build themselves or they're going to find a pull out of a hat to make Puerto Rico a state.
Aside from trying to impeach Trump, which they also said they wanted to.
A number of Democrats have already come out and said they want to make Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico, as well as pack the Supreme Court, all if they can get in power in 2028. This is another big reason J.D. Vance is so important in 2028.
And lastly, Rebel News says...
You can go to you for a moment.
Okay. Well, just talk, I guess. Yes, thank you so much, Stephen Jensen. And okay, now we can come back.
I had to blow my nose really quick.
I thought you said it was fine to do that on camera. You said I should sneeze on camera, which I try not to do. Rebel News has a fact check saying, quote, there is currently no law that would strip Alberta residents of their Canadian citizenship if the province were to separate from Canada. And we do continue to see, and which is why I'm making a whole video about it, this argument that, oh, you will lose your Canadian passport, or you will lose your Canadian citizenship, even if you were born in Canada. It's very difficult, as Rebel News says here, to strip somebody of their Canadian citizenship just because, essentially, and we do go into negotiations as Alberta starts to become independent. But it's crazy that especially the Forever Canadians, continue to try to use this argument to say, no, this is why you should stay in Canada, because you'll stop being Canadian. And in a way, I do think, well, I mean, isn't that kind of the point as well?
Alberta is the one with all the leverage here, not Canada. And I think Canada secretly knows that. They don't want to talk about that, though. Alberta needs to wake up to how much leverage power they actually have. Canada's not going to take away the passport because they're going to want to keep deep ties and connections with Albertans, because they're going to want to lean on that. Even if Alberta manages to get its independence, they're going to want to tug at the heartstrings of the Albertans that run for politics and start running Alberta and the country of Alberta, because they're going to need those routes going through Alberta, whether it's east to west or west to east. So they have a lot more to lose by pulling the Canadian passport from Albertan residents. That's obvious at this point.
It says, Alberta Fact Check, Canadian-born really bad people, I'm going to have to say, keep their citizenship. Why would Ottawa strip it from Albertans? And number one, because it's not that easy to do. in general, especially if you were born somewhere. It's pretty hard to, unless you do something really, really bad. But would they do that for the entire population of the former province of Alberta? It would be number one, a bureaucratic headache. And number two, it would take quite a while for it to actually take effect.
I disagree with that completely. I think it would be very easy for them with an elbows up campaign to actually play hardball with Alberta. The thing I would look at here is, why would they and why wouldn't they? What would be the pros and what would be the cons? They have far more to benefit by not taking the passport from Albertans. It's just a fact. When they go into negotiations, when they want to go west to east and east to west, they're going to want to really, again, try to lean on that heritage and that we used to be a family and we should be cooperating when it comes to negotiations. They're going to want every part of historic leverage they can on Albertans in order to get the best deals that they can, because Alberta is, again, going to have a ton of leverage over Canada, just like what we showed in the breaking news segment.
Now, I don't understand what your point is. Do you think they can take away the passport or they can't? Because I'm saying they can't.
They absolutely can, and they can do it fairly easily. And
well, we have a video contradicting that coming out tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm aware. You've waited a long time to distribute the video. That being said, they could very easily do it. The thing is, I don't think they have anything to gain from taking, and they have a lot to gain from leaving the passport in. That's the thing.
Okay, but also the mechanics is a lot more difficult as well, because I've looked into it quite a bit. But Lyle Norman, thank you so much for the 5 gifted memberships as we're debating the passport issue. And all these people that will show up on screen, please do thank Lyle Norman for the membership.
Thank you.
I don't mention the names because I did get a comment once saying, please don't read my name out loud, so I never know which of you do want your name read out loud and which ones don't. But Lyle Norman also says the cost of cows are going up also.
Yeah. And also just look at this. I mean, the Americans, it's really hard to get dual citizenship within the United States. In Canada, it's not. And Canada has the elbows way up when it comes to America and Trump, and they haven't revoked those passports. There's a lot of countries that they have really bad relations, but they still have dual citizenship with those countries. They generally like the idea of dual citizenship. And because Alberta has so much leverage over the rest of Canada, I think it's highly unlikely they pull the passport. But even if they do, in my opinion, you should be ready to give up the passport and we should be Alberta first. But I think it's very unlikely that Canada does that, just because they're going to want to lean on that leverage of that historical, we used to be in a family together.
Well, I think it's important to have that mentality, but again, it would be incredibly impossible almost to for Canada to just with one signature of a pen wipe away people's citizenship.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. An executive power, just like Donald Trump has implemented in the United States. Carney has implemented similar things there. The prime minister alone could easily revoke the Albertan
I did a lot of research about this, but okay. Pete says there's more liberal MPs at the Stampede than there are in the Commons. Well, of course, it's more fun, and of course, they love to pretend to be something that they are not.
Well, absolutely. And they know how important Alberta is right now. They're trying to give Alberta the biggest hug they can. And they also know one of the big trade negotiators from the United States happens to be there for the next 3 days, or was there 3 days ago. I think he's leaving maybe today or tomorrow. They're going to try to represent Canada, and they're going to try to do it in a big way. Well, I've also heard there is a ton of Albertan flags, especially when it came to the UCP.
And Donna Robinson, hello, and thank you for being here, says, hi, Nat and Guy. Rumor or proposal is to have ICE at every voting station in blue states to prevent any ballot skullduggery for midterms. That would put the Democrats up in arms, but wouldn't it be a bad idea? I was watching Harmeet Dillon today. For the midterms, they're not going to have a big press. They have a little bit of a press. A lot of independent media is blowing it way out of proportion. The main state they're going to focus on is Michigan. I think 6 other states they're going to focus on in a minor way. But in the 2028 election, they have a full-on assault coming out to make sure everything is on the up and up, and cardboard isn't going to go up on those windows like it did in the one election, so nobody could actually see what was going on in there. And then they shut down polling stations, and they reopened them, and they were flipped in the morning. Mm-hmm. Faye19, hello, says, I took my granddaughter on a road trip this week from Edmonton to Sparwood, BC this week. I'd never even heard of Sparwood. Says, Alberta is such a beautiful place. Our cowboy trail is breathtaking. We are multi-generational Albertans. And I do love every time when some of you tell me that, oh, yes, my great-great-great-grandfather built this and started this business in Alberta, and I still know where my roots actually trace back to Alberta. And even before that, when my family migrated towards Alberta and started settling there as well. So it's great to keep that. And that is actual history, not the history that now is being tried to be, which is now being sold essentially to the educational system, through the educational system to children, to make them forget that they actually have a history.
Yeah, we need to have some kind of ad campaign that leans on the differences between Canada and Alberta, so it distinctively shows the different culture. That cowboy culture that lies in Alberta is very distinct. The rest of the culture in Canada has erased its own history. It's a multicultural kind of culture. It has no culture, and that's the point. And showing that difference, I think, will be important, especially when we go into the binding referendum.
Lori P. Alberta Girl, hello, says, what are your thoughts on this $100 that the government wants to give Albertans?
I thought it was $200. Yeah, it's Danielle Smith. I think it's the federal government working through Danielle Smith to say Alberta is working for everybody. Vote to stay part of Canada here.
And
Just like these pipelines that have no shovels in the ground, yet we're having to make a lot of concessions. We see we're going to have to make even more concessions when it comes to British Columbia and every other single province if we do go for the East Coast pipeline as well. The American pipeline would be much easier, but we would need to have a real premier in power that says we're cutting the Canadian government out of this. We own our natural resources. That's what it says in the contracts. So why would we pay a carbon tax to Canada when it's between us and the United States? That's the pipeline that needs to get built so we can kind of really show what the federal government is willing to go to try to get that unjustified carbon tax.
And Stephen Jensen, thank you so much for the $5 super chat, saying they couldn't take away Omar bad person's passport. Can't happen now due to legal precedents set. And again, that's why there is a lot of steps that would have to happen. And again, it is essentially an impossible bureaucratic nightmare if they did try to do that. I mean, they might hoard it over. They might try to say that that's what they're going to do. But in reality, it's if you were born, especially if you were born in Canada, it would be almost impossible for them to just strip it without you having committed a very serious crime. And even with the precedents already set.
Yeah, I think it's less about the passport in this particular situation and more about what you actually want somebody to kind of do. You don't press an issue every time because you want to win the issue. It's not necessarily about taking Ilhan Omar's passport.
No,
it's
Omar, it's somebody else.
It's more about exposing what is kind of happening there. Same thing in Canada. This is why we need a premier that's going to try to implement Alberta's sovereignty after the non-binding referendum and leading up to the binding referendum. We have to do things that's going to force the federal government's hand to take action to take away Alberta's sovereignty, to educate the people in real time.
Lyle Norman says, I'll give up my citizenship for Alberta independence. But again, even if they say you're going to have to, I would say it's very, very hard for them to do that. Pete says, it's not like Alberta's...
Oh, well, 1 second. And I think it's not so much about the hardcore independence people. I think hardcore independents understand there's far more benefits to being Alberta, even if you have to give up your Canadian citizenship. But it's more about that soft middle. A lot of people want to have 1 foot in, 1 foot out, I think, especially on this first non-binding referendum.
But I'd go back to saying that choice will basically not exist at this moment. But Pete says it's not like Albertans would not have a passport. Any country that accepts a Canadian passport would accept an Alberta passport. And again, especially with Alberta being a new nation and being able to start those talks and between trade talks, but also immigration, etc., talks, visa talks with other countries, they would be able to set different parameters as well, even within Alberta, but also within other countries.
I just think
probably more accepting of Alberta.
There's far more liabilities, I believe, especially in the future, by having a Canadian passport. They can easily change different laws and subject to their laws, demand extradition and things like that. Now, it would be up to the Albertan government not to do that. But what happens if they start demanding some kind of different tax system where people that have dual passports now have to pay taxes in Canada, even if they don't earn money there? There's any speech laws. What happens if they want to still subject dual citizens to their speech laws and demand extradition? I think it's far more of a liability to keep your Canadian passport once Alberta is free. But I do understand some people want 1 foot in, 1 foot out.
But I also think we're getting confused between citizenship and passport. Passport is just a document that allows you to travel outside of the country you're in. Citizenship would convey everything you're talking about. But a passport essentially is just a form of identification that you use outside of the country you currently reside in, or that you are currently
How do you get a passport?
You apply for it.
Yeah, but say I'm not a citizen of a country. Can I get a passport from Mexico if I'm not a citizen?
No, you have to be a citizen.
You have to be a citizen.
or you can be, in certain terms, asylum seeker, blah, blah, blah. But yes.
For the most part, you have to be a citizen in order to have a passport.
Yes, but but still, Canada does differentiate slightly between Canadian-born and Canadian citizens.
But what I'm saying is they can easily change a lot of the rules, especially with their dual citizens or dual passport holders, very easily. So that's why I think it's more of a liability to have a passport if Alberta does get its independence.
But we'll see. Cindy Melnick says, I will not accept to be bribed for the $100. It's a way to bribe people to sign up for a digital ID. Oh, of course it is.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that point as well, yeah. And yeah, they're going to be rolling that out. This is the soft rollout. Then they'll start implementing more and more reasons why you absolutely have to have it, or there's going to be repercussions. The first is the $100 bribe.
Mm-hmm. Lori P says, I was thinking the exact same thing, and I don't want to give them my permission for personal information. And as well as we get closer and closer to October 19th, but also to next year's binding referendum, hopefully that will be happening, we will see more and more, I would even call them almost bribes to make Alberta seem great by itself and sovereign within a united Canada. And you might want to stay in Alberta because we're improving this and that would help the federal government. And I think we're starting to see this first push by even starting those talks about the pipelines that we talked about yesterday.
They used the mass grave hoax just before one of Trudeau's election, and they gave out tens of billions of dollars bribes across Canada to get First Nations vote and to get other tangential votes as well. So they're definitely going to give out massive bribes when it comes to Alberta. These two pipelines are just two things, but there are no shovels in the ground. Those aren't a reality. If we make it to the second referendum, you're going to see massive amounts of bribes coming out. And when they say, you shouldn't go for independence because you're not going to get anything from it, absolutely wrong. Just look at Quebec. They've always used that leverage over the federal government, and Alberta will be in a better place no matter what happens as long as they vote yes on the non-binding referendum. So they're going to get something out of this, number one. Number two, hopefully the best thing they get out of it is actually their independence, but make sure you have something tangible in your hand.
Pete says, vote on the second option that yes, you would like to have a second question. Pete says, when you do your T4, you do your Alberta tax. If Smith wants to send out $100, she has all the info she needs. I ain't filling out anything for $100.
Well, absolutely. And we do have another clip. I believe it's on tomorrow's show. It may be on today's show, but there is another state in the United States talking about completely getting rid of income tax. They're going to start implementing that very soon. So that's all state taxes are going to be absolutely gone. And they think that's going to be beneficial for the state, which I believe it would be as well. So getting rid of taxes completely in a free and independent Alberta would be very easy, especially because of the amount of resources and the economy that will absolutely boom once it's independent.
Smile to life every day. Hello, and thank you for being here. Says hi, Nat and Guy. Hello, and Todd. Hello. Says should have seen the whacked out forever Canadian we ran into in Veteran today. I got it all on video, and he's being charged. Oh, interesting. So it was actually like a crazy person, or did something enough to be charged.
Well, because you did film it all, I'm guessing the police are going to take it. Hopefully, you're able to actually post that.
Yes. I'd be interested to see.
Yeah.
But now let's actually go into Alberta politics.
He doesn't discuss federal politics. He only concerns himself with Alberta's independence.
And let's start with the Globe and Mail.
Well, and I will say in the last article in this section will be Stephen Jensen's one of the videos that he made. So
yes, the last video will be a video. Globe and Mail says more than 40% of Canadian manufacturers weighing to move to the U.S. KPMG poll finds because of course they can't stay in Canada, and multiple businesses already and multiple business owners have been saying it is impossible for us to try to even continue to do business within Canada.
The first 40%, and that's the ones that are polled now, will be the businesses that actually survive. The other 60% will be either eaten up by the government through loans and then have to give up partial ownership to the government. I believe that's what's going to happen. It's starting to happen in other countries. That's the mechanism they're trying to use to move Canada towards communism. It's not just the natural resource sector. It's a lot of these other sectors as well. The dye manufacturing sector is extremely vulnerable right now. So they're already trying to run that play by offering loans to them, loans that they know that they can't pay back, number one, which will be followed up most likely by a second loan, which will be for ownership of part of the company to the federal government, I believe.
And I think a lot of these businesses are so that you don't really realize them either moving or deciding to move or thinking about moving away from Canada because they don't get publicized as much or they don't get interviewed as much, but it is already clearly happening.
Oh no, I mean it's all over the place. It's obvious Canada is absolutely emptying out at this point. And what a lot of people aren't realizing are why it's emptying out. It's because the USMCA went to a year-on-year review that does not give enough security to businesses to make a long-term plan. If they just move their headquarters and move their manufacturing to the States, they have reliability and they know what's going to happen.
But next, let's go see the inevitable, obvious prelude to what happened with the Vancouver condos and Mark Carney. For one, Sparnatch says, quote, Brookfield co-partnered with Vancouver-based developer Concert Properties 15 days before the $3.2 billion BC condo bailout announcement. Liberals just killed Conservative motion 5-4 to summon Brookfield, Bob Rennie, and Housing Minister Gregor Robertson for an ethics probe because, again, they have their majority right now.
This is just one of the small things. I mean, I was recently looking into Chrystia Freeland and the contracts she's giving out in Ukraine. 5 of the 7 multi-billion-dollar contracts are all going to Brookfield companies. I mean, this is an international level scandal they're going into. It's not just condos, and it has a lot to do with a lot of things. Mark Carney specifically sent her over to Ukraine to dish out those contracts, and now you're having scandals happening with inside the country, which you can't do nothing about. We know it's there. We can see it's there, yet the Liberals have a majority government, so they're just going to vote it down every time. And what do you think is going to happen? This is just a money scandal. When they want to usher in communist policies, there's nobody there to stop them because the opposition parties no longer have a say in Mark Carney's majority Canada.
And again, we're already seeing it with freedom of speech, for example. A lot of those bills being rammed through and nobody gets a say and there's no debate about it even, which Andrew Lawton was trying to have some debate on it, but they said, no, we don't need to, and essentially just stamp it and go through. Next, Rise of Alberta says, Canada spent years making Alberta pipelines unbuildable. Now that independent support is growing, we get 1 taxpayer-funded pipeline and 1 feasibility study. So ask yourself, is Canada actually changing direction, or is Ottawa just trying to calm Albertans down before they choose independence? I would obviously lean towards the second one. And again, I think we're going to see even more of this coming
Which one's the second one?
That it's not just Ottawa trying to calm Albertans down.
So you would say smoke and mirrors.
Before they chose independence. Well, no, they might be building it, but I'm saying they're using this as a manner to quell Alberta independence.
Yeah, I don't even think it's meant to quell Alberta independence. I think they don't have the mechanisms built yet. So they're trying to use this to quell Alberta independence. Well, they build the mechanisms, but I think a real change is coming to Canada and not in a good way. It's full on communism going to be funded through the natural resource sector. I fully believe that everything Mark Carney is doing is indicating that, not just in Alberta, but when it comes to federal laws and different mechanisms that he is building. So I think a change is coming, and I don't think it is smoke and mirrors, but it's not the normal kind of change that would come to a country. It's communism in its purest form, I think.
And again, never specifying if it's a good or a bad change there. Obviously, in Canada nowadays, anytime there's change, it's a bad one. But next, Rise of Alberta also says this is bigger than politics. It's about making sure our kids inherit freedom, opportunity, and a future worth building. The future is Alberta independence. And I think that is also, you could also move or change the sentiment to the kids themselves or to young people themselves, saying this is for your own future and you get to build our country and take part in history that never almost happens.
Yeah. Do you want to be able to reach out and actually be a part of the politics, be a part of the country, feel like it's a small enough government where your vote actually matters? Or do you want to be lost in this communist hellhole that Canada is currently building right now? This is what the vote is about on October 19th, at least the first of a couple votes we're going to have here.
Mm-hmm. And lastly, as promised, let's go to listen to Stephen Jensen's Alberta Declaration of Independence.
And
is what it's
hopefully
called.
it comes in okay. If it doesn't, let us know because we have noise cancellation on the computer. This studio seems to be okay, not like the other studio. Because it has words and music, it kind of gives the audio a little bit of problems sometimes.
Hopefully it works. And again, if you haven't subscribed yet, please go to subscribe. Oh, it doesn't show up, but it's Alberta Freedom First. That is the channel. You can just see the tail end there, but let's play it.
In the Assembly of Free Albertans, this 4th day of July, 2026. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands that have held them bound. We hold these truths self-evident. All men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with unalienable rights to life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness. Governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. When any government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right and duty of the people to alter or abolish it. Prudence counsels against change for light causes. But when a long train of abuses reveals a design to reduce a people under economic and cultural vassalage, it is their right, their duty, to throw off such government.
Okay, and you can leave it there. And I highly do recommend going to Steven Jensen's channel. It's not just this video he's made. He's making a ton of content right now that's absolutely fantastic. A lot of different music as well. And I will say, it seems like, I mean, that brings it up perfectly, but the government seems to forget it's the people that are supposed to comprise and make up the government. It's the people's will that's supposed to decide what the government does. Governments around the world, especially Western governments, whether it's Canada, the UK, the EU, Australia, seem to be ruled by the elites and no longer care what the people say. They're not even asking for votes on the most fundamental questions of the society, like mass immigration. That was never put to a vote in any Western country. Why not? Because they know they wouldn't be able to win that vote. So they try to push it through the elites and the mechanisms of parliament and other legal systems.
But now let's go back to your comments, and I'll go back to your comments, and then we'll get into Alberta Personalities. I always mess up the order of the things. Okay. Lyle Norman says his name is Mac. I'm guessing that crazy person also says he's a crazy NDPer and says he's an unstable dude. Well, I would say if he supports the NDP, he's unstable just by knowing that part. And Steven Jensen did up. Steven Jensen, thank you so much for the $10 super chat, saying thank you for showing that. Of course, and again, we do love it when you send us things or pictures, or if you're going to an event and then you got some pictures you'd either want us to show on the show or just to let us know how things are going down there. We always really, really appreciate it, and really appreciate Steven Jensen for sending us what he's been working on. And I'm also looking forward to seeing what Todd is working on with his new iPhone as well, because we do need more people engaged. We do need more people producing stuff, content, talking to people on the street, and moving forward with Alberta independence.
Well, and it's absolutely fantastic to see people like Steven Jensen and Todd as well starting to make content and things like that, because when people are just first starting to do a lot of these things, it gives other people confidence that they can do it as well. That's why on our original channel, we left up all the content, and I think we migrated a lot of it to our older videos on this channel, so you can watch them and you can see like it takes time, but anybody can do it, and it just takes a lot of failure to get good at something. And I'll say the real Steven Jensen and I'm guessing Todd are going to be a lot better than we were when we started, because we were absolutely horrible. A lot of those old videos are really, really embarrassing. I was extremely nervous to be on camera. I still get nervous to be on camera. That being said, I think it's necessary to kind of show that part so it can help other people know it's not easy.
And I do know, for example, that KP4U spent the weekend spamming our old videos on RUMBLE. Thank you for all the comments, KP4U. And those are some of the really old videos that I used to make when I was still trying to get comfortable. But yeah, you can find them also here on YouTube under the playlist that says all our old videos to get some inspiration or to feel less bad about yourself, I guess.
And you see all the different mistakes. There's a ton of audio mistakes left in there where the audio just didn't work. The lighting was just absolutely blown out. You look like a ghost.
Makeup.
all kinds of mistakes. Things are going to happen, but just publish it and just do the best you can do. Yes. And I'll say Stephen Jensen came out extremely professional right off the bat. It made me feel like I should have been a lot better when I started.
Pete says smoke moving in on Calgary from the Boston bar fire. Blow it away. But no, I remember when I went to Calgary, specifically when I was doing that road trip with family members. It was right during the forest fires of the unmanaged or wrongly managed forests that Canada has been leaving to just essentially spark up fires and then contaminate and actually pollute all over, so they can continue to say, oh no, that was a big thunder. Climate change. But hopefully it moves quickly onwards. But I do know how bad it can get, especially in Calgary.
Yeah, you really have to realize I've looked a lot into different very progressive literature and things like that from the 70s and 80s, and there was a lot of talk about using forest fires to take over different massive parts of land within countries. They did that within California, especially after the policies they put in California. They're trying to capture that land, put low-income housing on there. They're trying to do something similar. I think it was either Chile or Argentina. We showed a similar story to that as well.
Let's remember the Palisades fire and the disaster that was Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom. One of the reasons why Spencer Pratt was running to be the mayor of LA in the first place. He got robbed of that, but
Spencer Pratt's still putting out great videos. Another one just came out. So even though he didn't win the election, he is becoming a powerhouse in politics, especially in California.
I'm sure he'll continue to move forward towards higher and higher posts. Sean says, asks Stephen Jensen, where is a part of this anthem where it talks about the MMW2 SLGBTQQIA plus equality and protection? Well, we don't need that one in Alberta because everybody is equally and the same. Smile to Life Every Day says that is awesome to Stephen Jensen. Yes, it is. Norman also says nice work, Stephen, and I concur. And Sean says I'm joking about the alphabet thing, Gen X sarcasm. We got it. Don't worry about it. I might be a few generations removed from there, but I understand it. Pete says Boston Bar is a town in interior BC. So the fires have started in BC. Again, terribly managed. We also have, I think, a video somewhere on our older channel about specifically that, when there were these massive forest fires and they were trying to make a big hype about it, but explaining how badly managed those forests have been on purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the amount of glyphosate the Canadian government is dumping on those forests is just making it dry tinder. There's any number of things going on. There's a certain beetle that absolutely kills all the trees too, and they do it for acres and acres, which just turns it to dry tinder. Chinese
something beetle? It has like the name of a place or
I don't think so. I remember when I went up north to work on a mine, huge acreage was just absolutely devastated, and they were saying it's from this one beetle.
Yeah, but it had a name. Okay, Stephen Jensen says fire with all this rain. Wow. Interesting as well, isn't it? Okay, a few more over here. Saltius Maximus, hello, I've missed you. Says, hi guys, been too busy to watch lately. See, I miss you. Says, hauling my last trailer load to my Alberta home, stopped in North Battlefield, Saskatchewan for an iced coffee. Cheers. Great.
Oh, fantastic.
And great that you're moving and you're actually putting action to words.
Yeah.
And you're able to do that. Pete, hello, says, is there a point in the separation if there's a pipeline, but then again, nothing is built in Canada until it is 10 years later and overpriced?
Well, and I've talked about this, and I know this is going far off into the future, assuming that a pipeline actually gets built. But if you go into the economics and the way I think it's going to be arranged by Mark Carney, he's saying he's going to build a pipeline, but he's not going to drop carbon taxes or the other carbon mechanisms and green climate policies. Actually, it's set to increase year after year within Canada. And what does that do? I believe he wants to operate these pipelines at a loss on paper, so no money will actually go to provinces. All the money will go to the federal government. And you're saying, well, if it's operating at a loss, how does money go to the federal government? All the different carbon taxes and all the different taxes that are put on top of it, it will be the federal government paying it out to the federal government. So it's a way to capture a lot of the tax revenue and distribute it as they see fit, not to the actual provinces. And I think that's how they usher communism in, because they're going to have to sell the oil at market market price. If they sell it at market price, they're going to end up selling it at a loss if they keep the carbon tax on. And I think that's the point. I think it's a huge scam on every level. They don't want to build it yet because he still wants to build the mechanisms for federal control as well. That's why he's going to delay it as much as possible. Lyle
Norman, thank you so much, says the pine beetle.
Oh, yeah, it was the pine beetle.
There we go. But there was another one with the name of a country, I'm pretty sure. Pete Griswold says, you mean arson season, right? Yes, that is exactly what we mean, with the perfect conditions to actually start fires. Sean says, obviously the way to stop the forest fires, you need to stop allowing hiking and camping and confine them to those beautiful Chinese-made condos. No, but yeah, and I mean, they already tried that. We already went over somebody that did try to go into forest when there was this ban imposed, just to prove how insane and ridiculous it was.
Yeah.
What was his name? I was trying to remember the name as I was talking, but yes, I'll remember the name and then bring it up again. But actually, now let's go to Alberta. Where are we? Politics or personalities? Personalities, there we go.
But they need to understand that Albertans are done, we're leaving, and there's no more conversation to be had. I know that's upsetting to people.
Okay, let's start with...
And this is the Danielle Smith that we always wanted. This is what everybody voted for in Alberta. This is why we need a leadership review, because we need to find somebody that's going to do this and actually implement it when they get in office, rather than sign MOUs and actually sign the sovereignty of Alberta away. Alberta has the leverage. When she was going into these negotiations, she negotiated like Alberta had no leverage. At one point, she used to sound like this. We need to find somebody that is this, and I believe that person is Keith Wilson. We're going to have a heavy hitter for a candidate, somebody that will be able to win an election in Alberta. I think Keith Wilson is that person. We're definitely going to need a leadership review on Danielle Smith after October 19th.
Rants of Alberta says, I miss this version of Danielle Smith, and I think many people concur.
To the new Prime Minister and the Liberal Party, I have one message. Alberta has had enough. Enough with Ottawa trampling over our provincial jurisdiction like Canada's constitution doesn't exist. Enough with the meaningless virtue signaling climate policies that only make Canadians poorer and threaten our energy security. Enough of their screw the West, we'll take the rest mentality. Enough with their soft on crime policies that let repeat offenders roam the streets on bail. Enough with their unsafe supply, their open border policies, their censorship laws, the list goes on and on. To the new Prime Minister.
Rather than use the leverage Alberta had in these negotiations, she used the sovereignty Alberta had and actually gave it away to the federal government, and it's unacceptable at this point.
And I will say again, career politicians will always look out for themselves first rather than their citizens, and that is how I think you can distinguish eventually, and maybe sometimes even too late, between those that actually... I saw that thunder right there.
She definitely has her sights set on Ottawa at this point. And with Doug Ford trying to oust Pierre Poilievre, I think she's hoping Doug Ford's successful at that, so then she can oust Doug Ford and come in as the hero, because conservatives on a national level aren't going to support Doug Ford.
I have to give that PSA that sometimes we have to give that it is raining really hard outside with really strong thunder and lightning. So if the show stops all of a sudden, it's not us being mean, it's that the power went out. But yes, let's move on now to Basil the Great says, quote, the EU tried to destroy Britain. I think it's succeeded in most part. Says our gold reserves are going to be shipped to Germany. Rupert Lowe explains how the elites of Europe have been trying to ruin Britain for decades.
Yeah, Rupert Lowe was on Joe Rogan. I ended up watching the whole thing. I watched it at 2 times speed so I could finish it before I came on the show. Absolutely fantastic. I'm a big supporter of Rupert Lowe. If they want to take back their country, he's the best person that they have to kind of do that right now. I will say I agreed with everything he said on there except for one thing, and I think a lot of people are woken up to it's not the EU. A lot of the power base and the leverage for the globalists actually lies within the UK and the city of London itself. And he was trying to place a lot of the blame on the EU, say this is where we lost our sovereignty, things like this, even though we had Brexit. That was the only part of the interview I had an issue. Everything else was absolutely bang on. He's doing a fantastic job. And I think ultimately, if he does try to blame the EU and say, well, it's the EU the reason we have all these problems, this is why we have to reassert our sovereignty as Britons and take back our country, it kind of gives the elite a way out, and they can just kind of lay low for a little bit if they want to try to survive this. Now, I hope they don't survive this, and we do profile Rupert on the show quite a lot because I do like him.
Again, Rupert Lowe is the politician that has started Restore Britain, which is essentially an answer to the failures of what was the other one called?
Reform UK.
Reform UK. Thank you.
Yeah, I will talk about that a little bit. Reform UK was exposed today. He was taking $5 million kind of donations, and he never claimed that he got those donations. So now, rather than resign, what he's saying is he's going to have another snap election at some point and let the people decide if he's going to stay in. That's Nigel Farage. So I've always called Nigel Farage kind of out from the beginning. He was able to pull the wool over a lot of people's eyes. I think Rupert Lowe is much more of the real deal. He's a traditional farmer as well.
But now let's actually go into the clip.
Can I pause you for a second? So what you think is that the multicultural invasion, the way it was set up, was on purpose, and it was on purpose to sort of diminish the idea of nationalism?
Yes, I think that well,
so this was like a long plan. So this was something that they must have had to sit down and like, who would be involved in this sort of a discussion where you would be willing to diminish patriotism, diminish this idea that Britain by itself is exceptional and the people are exceptional?
It was a long, deceitful plan. So I always say...
Who implemented it?
The European elites in league with our elite, who effectively, if you remember in 1975, we joined what was called the European Economic Community. It wasn't effectively anything other than an economic union. But that very quickly changed, and effectively they tried to politically integrate Europe. That failed, and then in 1997, they tried to force it through with the introduction of the euro. So having failed politically, they tried to do it financially. That was my first foray into standing as a member of Parliament, to fight to save the British pound, because once you lose your currency, effectively you lose your sovereignty and your national identity. And our gold reserves were going to be shipped out to Germany, to Frankfurt, and we would have become a vassal state, part of the European Union. It would have been irreversible. But in the event, thanks to Sir James Goldsmith, we secured enough votes. We forced the establishment to promise a referendum before they surrendered to the euro.
And here's the thing. A lot of people want to say, Brexit didn't work out. I think Brexit worked out just fine. It's the corruption within their political system itself that they never actually reformed. They needed Brexit, and then they needed a reform of their political system. Alberta is already 2 steps ahead. We not only want independence, we want a complete reset on the political system as well. So it's not going from globalist government to globalist government. We actually want a reform. That's what Rupert Lowe is trying to do now, is reform the system. It's going to be a long, bloody process in order to do it, even if they can. He was quick to point out the Fabian Society, and they went into quite a discussion about the Fabian Society and how the majority of members in Liberal Parliament within Britain are part of that society. And their logo happens to be a wolf in sheep's clothing, of all things. If you don't know about the Fabian Society, it is something worth doing a deep dive on.
Sorry, I'm fixing my hair. There we go. But lastly, let's go to this video. Saying it's from Showing Your Faith in Humanity. It says the moment when the British granddaughter introduced grandfather to American grilled cheese.
And I just like this clip, especially with America starting to export its culture again. It's something kind of stupid, but I really like the old guy, and I really did like the idea of a grilled cheese sandwich being a very American thing.
Hello, Daddy.
Oh, hello, Bob.
Hello.
Is it dinner time already?
It is, and I've got you a recommended meal from America.
Ooh.
Yeah. It's grilled cheese and tomato soup. Apparently, it's very, very popular in America.
Oh, very nice. That's unusual, isn't it?
It is, isn't it?
Well, it is for me.
And why don't you... No, we're going to play more of that. Why don't you get me a bib like that? That's absolutely fantastic.
Somehow, I don't know what happens, but there's always avocado all over the kitchen and even all over my clothes everywhere.
Well, if I had a tuxedo bib, I'd be fine.
So... we would call it cheese on toast and soup.
Well, would we? I think we'd call it a cheese toasty, wouldn't we?
Well, it's the same, isn't it, really?
No, because cheese toasties are open, not closed.
I suppose it is.
Cheese on toast.
Is it cheese? Yeah, okay. Well, cheese toasty.
Cheese toasty. Well, because you've cooked it, you want to call it cheese toasty. We'll call it cheese toasty.
No, we're not calling it cheese toasty. We're calling it grilled cheese.
Oh, it's grilled cheese then. Oh, this is nice grilled cheese.
I know. Shall we look at it?
Ooh,
there you go.
That
For
looks
the
nice,
cheese.
doesn't it?
And what the American people do, I've been told, is they dip it in the soup.
Oh, what, like that?
Yeah, and then eat it. So let's see what you think of that then.
It's a good job I've got a bib on.
I know it is, isn't it? Dun, 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 dun.
Okay, and you can leave it there. Absolutely fantastic. And I've liked all these cultural videos coming out because of the FIFA World Cup. Now, that one wasn't because of FIFA, but it was related to the exploitation of American culture, which I really like because America has been so ashamed of itself under Joe Biden and a lot of other more recent presidents who have been trying to erase its cultural history and its Western values. Canada is doing the exact same thing. We need a leader that is going to bring that back, and I don't think there is a leader, and I don't think the system can be reformed in Canada. That's why we have independence popping up in Alberta, and hopefully it's going to be successful there.
And I did see a lot of comments under that video saying, "Oh, there's no way that he didn't know what a grilled cheese was." I didn't know what it was. Here in Mexico, I never had one before I left for Canada, which is I think the first time I tried one.
Yeah, in Canada and the United States, and I grew up very poor, so grilled cheese sandwiches were very common for me from a very young age.
Not for me. Here we do quesadillas because, of course, that's our version of the grilled cheese, I guess. Faye19 says Pine Beetle. Yes, thank you so much. Troglodyte, hello, says Lytton and Boston Bar are well known for holding some of the highest temperature records in Canada. Lytton holds the all-time national record of 49.6 degrees centigrade set on June 29th, 2021.
Yeah, and you have to realize recently a lot of the temperatures, especially in Canada, are being set not because of climate change, but they're changing where the weather stations are located, and they're taking down a lot of the weather stations more in the north, so it brings down it brings up the overall temperature.
Samantha Live Every Day says, I was surprised to hear from Alberta Proud Dad mentioning about the communist summer school on July 4th and 5th. We talked about that yesterday. We showed the video. And yes, also one of our subscribers, who was it, Todd, brought it up as well and said that the posters were all over the place.
Yeah, they're far enough down the path of communism already, and with their majority government, and they're already starting to set up the policies. They're at a point they actually need those summer schools if they want to go to even the next level. They really need a full-on indoctrination assault. The United States is far behind because Trump got in twice. That threw a monkey wrench into the entire thing. Otherwise, the United States might have been right where Canada is now, where there is no reform in it. The reform is independence at this point.
Pete says a fire now has a Trans-Canada closed.
Wow.
Stephen Jensen says Jeff Everly in New Brunswick.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. That was the name. Pete says evacuations in Fraser Canyon. And again, why do we only look at, oh, there's these big fires now and it's happening every summer, and why might it be? What's causing these fires? No, let's just continue to talk about the dangers of climate change and how we need to do more of our part to stop the climate change. However, we never talk about how the forests are being not managed and how they haven't been managed for at least the past 15 years, properly managed.
And also, you have to realize if your home does get burned down, building permits and regulations are absolutely out of control in Canada. I watch quite a few home builders and things like that, and the same thing happens in the United States. It's a way to put in regulations for the government, and if your home burns down, very often people aren't going to be able to afford to build a home again under new regulations.
That's the situation they've got us in.
And that's the situation that happened in California as well.
Yes, and the Palisades fire. Stephen Jensen says, wish we got thunderstorms every day too. I love lightning displays. I don't. I changed to your camera because lightning just came through like right next to the windows, but you couldn't see it.
Well, I don't mind it because here in Mexico, it happens between 5 and 8 o'clock. Before that, it's pretty much sunny, maybe a little bit of cloud. And then after that, it's clear as well. So I don't mind it when it's almost like a clock.
But it's very loud, and you can't, like, it does. You do see the lightning coming in. I don't love it. Justin GB says, hello, folks watching 2 times speed to catch up. Thank you so much for probably watching our debate on passports right now at 2 times speed. Pete says, Canadians dip grilled cheese and ketchup. Ew. I'm sorry.
I used to do mac and cheese and grilled cheese all the time.
I eat quesadillas, like a normal Mexican. Pete says Boston Bar is really close to Lytton that burnt to the ground a couple of years ago. Wouldn't they have learned what to do to manage the forests around there not to? So that wouldn't happen again.
Well, I remember when they were having that firefighter conference.
Salmon was here.
I remember when they were having that firefighter conference of all women firefighters, and that fire broke out and they weren't able to do anything. It really showed the incompetence. Do you remember that story?
It sounds familiar, but I don't remember it specifically. Stephen Jensen says, Berta Proud's video last night about pipelines was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Did you watch it?
Yeah, he's been making a lot of good videos lately. My favorite video, again, was what the other individual brought up, was that video about the communist summer schools. That's absolutely freaky. I mean, I want to do a video on it as well. We're going to have to do more research because that needs to really get out, not just to people in Canada, but people in the United States as well. Need to realize what a threat Canada is if they're holding communist summer schools in the most conservative province in Canada. They feel comfortable doing that.
Sponsor Life Every Day. Thank you so much for the $2 super chat saying, I need to catch up, LOL. Not sure on which part, but thank you. Stephen Jensen says, more taxes always stops the fires, right? Yeah, and also makes the healthcare better and also makes everybody healthier and et cetera, et cetera. It makes everybody smarter too, apparently.
Yeah, and in reality, obviously, there's a lot of sarcasm going on there. It actually makes forest fires worse, just like it makes the homeless situation worse. You see in California, but you also see in Canada, when they bring the homeless industrial complex in, the more money that goes into the system, the more the homeless rate actually ends up goes up, because they've created a homeless industrial complex. But it's the same with forest fires or anything else. In order to keep funneling money into this money laundering scheme, they want to exasperate the problem.
Pete says, it's super hot and dry in the Fraser Canyon. I believe started from the sparks of a train. But again, why wasn't that brush cleared? Why wasn't the situation mitigated and managed so it didn't, even if a spark did fly off from a train, it didn't cause a gigantic forest fire?
Especially around train lines. Like, that should be a place where you're clearing and not dumping glyphosate. I'm not saying they are dumping glyphosate there, but they are dumping glyphosate over the Canadian forest right now.
And Pete says a dipstick mayor of Jasper blamed Alberta for the fire that burned through the town. One problem, they're in a national park, so it's totally Ottawa's responsibility. And they don't manage their forests.
Well, and when it was Jeff Evely, they were trying to say, oh, you have 10 issues that can cause a forest fire. My freaking ass. That's pure authoritarianism.
Yes. And then quickly over on RUMBLE, KP4U says, I don't care if I lose my Canadian passport. It would be a huge upgrade to have an Albertan one.
Yeah, like I said, it's far more of a liability to keep your Canadian passport with the crazy rules and regulations that they're bringing in.
True. But now let's actually go into Alberta's Canada.
I'm angry. I've had enough of these people.
And let's start with...
And I want to say one more thing about that. We bring up the Canadian passport, but it makes me think of something that's somewhat related, and that is... there should be no foreign investment from Canada coming into Alberta in the beginning, because if you allow money to flow in from whether it's the federal government of Canada to help Alberta or do other things, it's going to be a liability. It's going to be a mechanism of control. They're going to try to manipulate the new Alberta political system and things like that. You really need to have hard lines to keep Canadian money out of a new formed Alberta. Because if Alberta is successful, it's going to shine a light on the federal government's corruption in the rest of Canada. So they're highly motivated to make sure Alberta fails, even if it does manage to get its independence.
Okay, let's actually go to... Ryan Gertison says, quote, yeah, I take accountability away from people who commit crimes and blame something with zero consciousness. Blame something with zero consciousness. This tragedy was carried out by a person with the intent to harm. Courts are even shifting away from the excuse of a chatbot told me to do it. There we go.
Now, moments ago, the province's Attorney General saying that BC wants to hold OpenAI accountable. OpenAI is one of the world's biggest artificial intelligence companies. At the heart of all of this, a mass shooting that happened in northern BC in Tumbler Ridge last February, in which 9 people died. The Attorney General, Nikki Sharma, says BC is preparing legal action to hold OpenAI accountable, and what role it may have played in the shooting is central here. Listen to this.
For their failure to notify law enforcement of the violent prompts made on its ChatGPT platform by the perpetrator prior to the tragedy in Tumbler Ridge.
And leave it there just for a second. And this has absolutely nothing to do with this tragedy. I know because we follow world news, whether it's the EU, whether it's the UK, whether it's Australia or Canada. All the countries are working together to try to get control over American social media companies through regulation, whether they use tragedies like this or just different legal mechanisms as well. They're trying to control speech because because America has free speech, and America is trying to export that free speech to the rest of the world, and they don't like it. So they've decided to all attack these American social media companies in conjunction with one another. There's a ton of court cases going on right now. Donald Trump is pushing back with the Granite Act and trying to protect free speech, but if the wrong person gets in after Trump, I have a feeling that free speech in the United States is going to be under attack itself.
We've retained legal counsel in both BC and California to explore all avenues to hold OpenAI and its decision makers accountable.
Not only that, and not only what you just mentioned, but also let's remember that they try to hide the fact that it was actually a trans individual or a person that had been within that ideology that committed this terrible act and this tragedy, which led to the tragedy. Let's not look at ourselves. Let's not look at the BC school curriculum. Let's not look at what we're teaching kids. Let's not look at SOGI 1, 2, 3 and everything that's going on with gender ideology within Canadian schools, specifically BC schools. I know because I used to work at 2 high schools. And the insanity that these children are being taught, that of course will lead to insane acts and the craziness that they're expected now to believe and to live under by being told by teachers and people that they're allegedly supposed to trust. So it's not just the excuse of using ChatGPT to actually go after free speech, but also to essentially absolve themselves of any kind of culpability, even though a lot of the things that had led this individual to the place where she was at, I don't remember which way it was, but where this individual was because of what they were being taught in BC schools.
Well, and again, this has nothing to do with that actual situation. This has everything to do with building mechanisms of control over American social media. And it's a little concerning that a lot of the American social media companies are actually building data centers, not only within Canada, but within Alberta. The $13 billion data center by Facebook just got approved. Danielle Smith had the big press conference today. We're going to talk about that tomorrow, but that's just another mechanism of control that the Canadian government can flex on Facebook, at least one of the platforms, once that data center is built.
Next, Antonio Tweed says, hold on. 1 second. Oh, no, I can't find it. There we go. Southern Gent Phil, thank you so much for the $10 super chat saying that's why we appreciate you both and your podcast. Thank you. Not sure about which part, but thank you so much. And we appreciate all of you watching and talking to us as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And debating with us even sometimes. Okay, and thank you so much, Southern Gent Phil, once again. Okay, Antonio Tweet says, Canada has become dark. We need help. At this point, honestly, I don't know if there's any helping or saving Canada if it continues to go down.
Yeah,
even a few more years down the path it's going down.
No, it can be saved right now through Alberta independence. It is the wake-up call the rest of Canada needs. And when I say the rest of Canada, I mean individual provinces. We're going to see one by one, hopefully, they all start fighting for their independence and they realize Canada is not only a sinking ship, it is going to try to take complete control over all natural resources, federalize them, and head towards communism at a breakneck speed.
In that sense, yes, I agree.
A constitutional lawyer says that what Carney is doing to Canada is far darker than anyone could imagine.
To understand what's really going on in our country and what's really going on in the world. Back in 2003, Prime Minister Harper actually gave a speech on this, and I'll just read this to you because this is going to hit. He says, conservatives need to reassess our understanding of the modern left. He says, it has moved beyond old socialistic morality or even moral relativism to something much darker. It has become a moral nihilism, the rejection of any tradition or convention of morality, a post-Marxism with deep resentments, even hatreds of the norms of free and democratic Western civilization. So, okay, translation, what does that mean? When Mark Carney and his people say that they want a new world order, that new world order begins with the death of Canada. Little by little, Canada is being turned into a perverted version of itself.
Well, and again, I mean, that was Stephen Harper way back then, but I think it goes way past just leftist progressivism within Canada. I think there is a complete uniparty there. When they do talk about one world order or a lot of other things like that with this globalist set of elites that Mark Carney runs with, Pierre Poilievre doesn't call it out. He just stays silent on that. He should be bringing that up in Parliament. He should bring up a lot of these communist policies and calling it for what it is, communism, but he doesn't touch on certain things. So
distracted by
And this is why I think Alberta needs its independence. The system itself is rotten to the core. It's heavily favored towards the Liberals, but even if the Conservatives get in, they're not going to be able to make the massive changes necessary because they're going to have a judiciary working against them, and they're going to have the structure of Canada and the Westminster system working against them as well, even if they're not part of a uniparty.
Next, David Creighton says, quote, Mark Carney, the Manchurian candidate, former Liberal MP and president of Can Affordable Dantigue, said it, and he explains why.
I think Mark Carney is an intelligent man, but I think he's very, very devious and mendacious. And I think he has a plan, and it's not one about building Canada strong. You called him a Manchurian candidate, I think, the first time we spoke with you a couple of years back. Right. And everything he's done since then has confirmed that, including going to China and saying, let's establish a new world order based on China's policies and China's.
And why do we know that this is the case? He has another master, and it's not the Canadian citizens. He has the ability and the power to himself just approve natural resource projects. It could literally turn around Canada inside of 12 months, and he could make it a national emergency priority to get those projects kind of built. But he wants to build mechanisms within those projects so he can move towards communism, not towards capitalism, because if he just approves everything overnight without building the mechanisms, the people, the country, and the province will be wealthy again. He does not want that. He wants to move it closer to the EU, so a lot of those dollars will go to the federal government and to the globalists.
China's supremacy. So I'll end that with you. But do you think Mark Carney is continuing on what you termed as a Manchurian candidate course?
Yes, he has and he continues to unsurprisingly not deviate from the point that he is operating on some other initiative, on some other direction. No country would surrender as Canada in its entire manufacturing sector to Chinese vehicles just because you want to push your net zero credentials. And I'd like to say, Mr. Carney and the rest of them, cut the crap on the climate bedwetting, because frankly, this is something my grandfather would have said. This is not something that an ordinary, sensible person would do. We would move away from that, pretending that Europe is somehow going to be our salvation, as opposed to engaging in what I think is an important tit for tat with the United States and not deviating from that at all, no matter how and who is the president. I mean, these are things that would have been the pursuit of reasonable prime ministers and reasonable governments in the past. But we have one that is completely fixated with pretending that Canadians are smarter and better than Americans, that are in some way superior to all of our competitors, and that we know what's best for the country, and that knowing that they have a cadre of people in the media, paid media, influencers, grifters, who will fawn over them at everything that they have done. But we are making some very dangerous choices. By the way, we're dealing with Tyson Krupp on the issue of submarines. Nice little thing.
And you can leave it there. And Carney isn't moving Canada closer to the EU because it's an economic benefit for Canada. The EU and the UK are telling Canada, you're going to unite with the EU because their bailout plan of the Russian national resources, $74 trillion, is not working out the way they thought. And they're looking at Canada and Canada's natural resources to be that bailout and that future plan that they had.
I had a point, and then the thunder's really distracting me. I hate thunder. Smell to life every day. Thank you so much for the $2 super chat and for letting us know that we do have a WEF building in Calgary. And what a time it will be when Alberta is independent and you can get rid of it.
Well, we really need to make sure the next president of the United States is going to continue down the same path Trump has gone down, because he's really pushed back the globalists, but they have enough resources to wait Trump out, even though they're in retreat. We need to follow that up with one more president, because that will be the death stake in their heart.
I remember what I was going to say. Sorry. Oh, Pete, I'll bring up your comment in afterwards. But I remember what I was going to say. Because very similar to what David Creighton was saying there. As he said, we've been conditioned to live essentially under a bubble, so you don't notice what's going on and how the change continues to be implemented, and you continue to be pushed towards more and more insane things, but you're bred by the propagandist machine that is the media and by the grifters and influencers, as he called them, to just be comfortable with that and thinking that that is normal. And I have loved seeing Canadians, but also people from the UK, especially the English people that came here for the game against Mexico, but also all the British people and Europeans going to the US and discovering that it's not at all what they were told it was during this World Cup, and saying, I can now see that I've been fully lied by the media and been told not to come here, and now I see that where we are at right now back home is not where I thought we were, or not the country we thought we were.
Freaking crazy to me that Canadians still haven't woken up at this point, and they've continuously voted this in. Even the EU, the UK, all their citizens are starting to wake up, and there's major pushback. And you can see that within Canada. And you can see that you have the exact same, not only policies, but the same Westminster system. And that everything is being implemented in conjunction with the EU as well. How did they not wake up at this point? I don't know. I have a feeling Australia is much the same as well as Canada. Yeah. Somehow, everybody else is waking up in the world. Trump is pushing back. You can see his policies are working, yet Australia and Canada are just being lulled to the promised land. The promised land is some kind of communist utopia, which utopia doesn't exist in communism.
Westminster system. I think it's a system that has allowed this to go as far as it has in the places where it's implemented. Wiretap Media says, quote, Minister of Defense David McGuinty claims Canadians are living in fear of Iran and Russia, and they're prepared to live in poverty to meet their aggressive 5% GDP NATO spending target, while China and India are subversively taking over Canada through economic warfare.
This is absolutely crazy. Nobody believes Russia is a threat except the EU elites, and that's why they want to keep pushing and pushing and pushing this war, and they want to expand that once they get Trump out of office. Now, what's going on in Iran? I don't know, but Trump is doing something on a global level with chess pieces behind the scene, because it's really affecting the EU and the globalists, having the Strait of Hormuz be under so much conflict. So I don't claim to know everything that's going on in Iran, but it's not as direct as it seems in Iran. With Russia, Ukraine, I think it's a lot more obvious. The EU wants to expand that war. They're fully committed to that 5% now all of a sudden, because they understand if they want to get the United States back on board, they better commit to that 5%. I think even if they do commit to that 5%, hopefully the United States is smart enough to pull out of NATO at this point. And if Alberta gets its independence, everything happens overnight. You're not automatically not within NATO, which is absolutely fantastic. You're automatically not within the UN. These are big benefits. You can directly have relationships with the United States and other countries directly, rather than three-letter organizations or NGOs and things like this.
1.2% to 2%, and Canada aims to get to 5%.
Yes.
Can you just say, do you think that the Canadian public is aware of the degree of sacrifice that it's going to have to make to achieve that kind of expenditure on defense? And where is that money going to come from? What has to be given up to get to that?
I think the Canadian people realize that there's been a lot of change. I think they realize that our geography no longer protects us as a matter of course. I think they saw through this recent war in Iran, that Iran, for example, deployed a missile which traveled over 5,000 kilometers, having announced to the world for 2.5 decades that they had no such capacity, that they only had a missile that could travel 2,000, maybe 2,500 kilometers. The Canadian people know that the threat landscape has changed. The Canadian people understand that there are foreign interference activities going on. They understand that we need to make these investments.
Do they understand where the money's going to come from?
The foreign interference that's happening in Canada is through its own government that has been infiltrated by globalist elites.
Sorry, I was trying not to sneeze on camera. Okay.
Do you yourselves understand?
Yes, we do. We're growing our economy. We're making major investments in the defense sector to generate more wealth, create more jobs, and provide the resources we need to accomplish this goal. And we're well on our way. I mean, we have done things in the last 12 months which I think the Canadian people are very supportive.
And I'm absolutely fine with having a strong military and investing in that, but it's very obvious and transparent why they're doing this. They're trying to connect to the EU, and they want World War III through Russia. I have very little doubt on that. And they're not investing in the right places. They should be investing in their soldiers and their equipment and things like this. What is the EU investing in right now? They're massively upping the amount of investment dollars they're going to need, and almost all of that is being invested not in their outdated equipment or their soldiers, but into nuclear weapons, which is absolutely ridiculous. They already have the United States on their side, who has a ton of nuclear weapons. You don't need to be investing in more nuclear weapons yourself. Fix your armies, fix your culture.
I think they saw the announcement yesterday for the submarine choice, and I think they said that's a very positive thing for Canada's security and sovereignty. And they're with us. I travel this country from coast to coast to coast, and I hear from them, please keep moving forward. Please keep us safe. Please keep us secure. And
giving contracts out to Germany, other EU countries, China, South Korea, for your military, when the USMCA is in jeopardy, most of those military contracts should be thrown on the table to work in conjunction with the United States. You'll never have a strong military in Canada because you just don't have the economics, and the country is so big. You really rely on most of your military advantage and support because you're close to the United States. And you should be working in cooperation with the United States to secure the north of Canada, not even because potentially Russia is a threat, but more so that China stops disrespecting your shipping lanes. They're already putting ships through northern Canada, and Canada saying that's our water. China saying, well, no, it's international water, and Canada can't do anything about it right now, so they don't.
And there's also been multiple reports highlighting how dangerous it is to have that northern whole part of Canada essentially unprotected at this point. Okay, let's go back to your comments. Pete says Alberta is not responsible for national parks whatsoever. No, exactly. And Stephen Jensen
But hopefully
says,
it will be once it gets its independence.
of its own. Stephen Jensen says AC/DC thunderstruck. We're about to be thunderstruck. I mean, if every time I make a face, it's because if you can't hear it, there's big loud thunder going on. Pete says, guess who was in charge of Parks Canada when the Jasper fire happened? Gilbo.
Yeah.
Of course he was. Troglodyte says, we used to do broadcast burn to manage fuel loads after logging. We no longer do that in BC. And a bunch of, what's it called? Managed burning? Controlled burning of the kindling, so it doesn't actually burn everything up.
When you put climate zealots in front, in charge of the forest and other sectors like that, they have a benefit to have those expand, not contract. And I think that's exactly what happened under Stephen Guilbeault.
Smells Alive every day says firecrackers and cap guns. That too. And Pete says 3,300 kilometer pipeline to Sarnia, where there is one already, just to bypass the US. Idiots. And then sell it as this huge benefit, and Alberta shouldn't leave. Pete says, do people have any concept of how much a 3,300 kilometer pipeline costs? Hundreds of billions. And yet the government wants to be able to pay for that so they can manage it. Federalizing it.
And I'm telling you, if she signs these MOUs and commits a future Alberta to all kinds of absolute craziness to these contracts, hopefully there's going to be a way out of those. I say no pipelines until after the binding vote. And if we get a leadership review on Danielle Smith, we can get a leader in there that's going to say no pipelines until a binding vote.
Pete says, so what's the plan? Tanker ban on NW northwestern BC for Alberta, but run tankers down the St. Lawrence Seaway in the most populated area of Canada in the most sensitive freshwater supply of the planet. Smart. Again, it's their stupid shield thing that they were talking about yesterday.
Yeah, as well as, of course, like the BC pipeline. Nobody's going to want to invest in that because it's a shallow water port. You can't even get big tankers in there.
And Pete says, and I concur with you, Pete. Believe me, I've tried to do this multiple times. It doesn't work. Pete says, by the way, it's Westminster, not Westminster. Yeah, I keep telling him. Says he doesn't care. Pete says, named after the Palace of Westminster in the UK. I know. He doesn't care. But thank you, Pete. Pete says, Carney has spent every cent that the government has brought in for the last 12 months, plus another $100 billion. How is that sustainable in any way of thinking? Because socialism works perfectly until you start running out of people's money, or your people start running out of money, starving, and then you have to explain yourself and be indebted and essentially become much more nationalized and insulated because you don't want the world to see Venezuela, Cuba, etc.
Once Danielle Smith actually releases her work on this $400 billion, which she already said, that's back of the napkin, it's probably going to be $300 billion. They're going to revise those numbers come the binding referendum next year because there's going to be another whole bunch of debt sacked onto Alberta for their costs for separation because they're going to want to up the national debt, and they're going to say, you have to take $200 billion. That would be an absolute deal. The longer we wait, the longer the more that debt is going to be because all Carney knows how to do is spend money.
Say Westminster.
Let's keep going here.
Say it. Sean says Canada's geography has been its protection, but now it's going to cost a fortune to properly defend such a massive frontier. It's reversed on itself now. The large land area will be a negative, except if they can get the help of, maybe China, maybe in India to help with that instead, or the EU even, instead of having to rely on the US.
No, that can't happen because that's a national security threat. If you know anything about the American military, if they invite the Chinese in there to build their national defenses, that could be considered an act of war. But you do have the United States there. That has always been the partner that has secured Canada for you for free. If they want to build a couple bases up in the north to secure shipping lanes, because China's already disrespecting Canadian waters, you should be working with them. They've basically given you a free military for decades now.
But that's what I'm saying. At this point, I wouldn't put it past Canada trying to do something like that.
No, there's a certain line that a country like Canada won't pass because they don't want to be invaded.
Pete says, ideally, even for Canada.
What do you mean you don't know? What do you mean you don't know?
Well, I mean, at this point, I think they've made it clear that they're much rather side with the EU and maybe even China than the US.
Yeah. Siding with a country is one thing, but when you cross a line that it would be considered an act of war.
But they've already got, for example, they've already got Chinese security guards patrolling natural resource sites within Alberta.
If China built a military base in Mexico, do you think the United States would invade Mexico? I 100% think so. Yeah, so why wouldn't they do the same for Canada?
Because Canada's retarded.
No, they would. And
I know they would. That's what I'm saying.
And it would be even easier to do it to Canada as well.
I know. That's what I'm saying. We did a whole video about this. Pete says, ideally, even for Canada, would be Canada east of somewhere around Manitoba, and the New West would be west of that. Stephen Jensen says, even Indigenous peoples would do prescribed burns to protect their villages before the white man came. And exactly, and these are ancient practices that have been used to manage forests for decades, centuries. And now apparently we forgot how to do that, and we just wonder why everything is burning around us.
The Canadian government used to do that as well. Yeah. So did the American government. Blue states are no longer doing that. They intentionally want these things to happen. And that's the same reason why California emptied their reservoir right before wildfire season.
Sean says, Danielle said a possible pipeline, quote unquote, regarding Northern Shield make-believe project.
Yeah, and a possible binding vote in October 2027 or the spring, she said. And then she put a bunch of different potential hurdles that would extend that. And she already said in the past it could be 2.5 to 3 years for a binding referendum. This is why as soon as we get past this non-binding referendum, we need a leadership review on Danielle Smith.
But speaking of all these geography things, let's actually go to Alberta and the world. Let's start with Nick Sortor saying President Trump is absolutely ripping Spain. Good, thank you. In front of the world, declaring we'll be cutting off trade, saying Spain is a wasted cause. Yes, it is. Pedro Fernandez has no idea what he's doing.
Yeah, and Spain needs a new leader at this point. He's absolutely a communist show. A lot of people might not know about Spain, but again, he's trying to usher in socialism and communism.
Sorry, Sanchez. The two last names crossed my
mind. And yeah, he did do a press conference after this, I believe, and he was saying, we have met our goals. We met our 2% now. They haven't met it for decades. They got an exemption not to meet the 5% like every other EU country. And it's good for Trump to call him out straight up.
And yet they allowed 500,000 people to become citizens quite literally with a stroke of a pen.
Well, it's the gateway for a lot of these mass migrations to come into the EU because it's attached to Africa, basically.
Pedro Sanchez, I know I said it wrong.
I was really testing. I wanted to see whether or not they'd be there. And the answer is
Turn it up.
I spoke to Germany, I spoke to France,
yes.
I spoke to UK, spoke to Italy, I didn't speak to Spain. Spain is a wasted cause. We don't want to do any trade business with Spain anymore, by the way. I'd like you to cut it off. Spain is a...
Turn it up, please.
More?
Yeah, but you can barely hear it.
I think they can hear it really loud. Let me know if it's too loud for you.
A terrible partner in NATO. They don't participate, they don't pay. I don't want anything to do with Spain. Cut off all trade with Spain, please. Including visits. Okay, we don't want anything to do. Watch them come running back. Oh, they'll come running back. They treat this man terribly. And this man's a good man, too. Great man. They're lucky to have him. But Spain doesn't agree to anything. And you shouldn't carry them. I mean, you sort of automatically carry because you're protecting an area, so they're there. So they probably figure they have to protect us, right? but we don't have to. We don't have to trade with them. I don't want to do any more trade with them. All right? Take it immediately. Don't even talk to them. They're hopeless. Bad people, because, you know, they have everybody else going and paying and working in Spain. In particular, Spain. There are a couple of others, but in particular, Spain. They're open about it. They're hostile about it. And let's see how hostile they remain when they call up and they, please, we want to trade with you, sir. We want to trade with you, sir. They make so much money with us, and we're going to see that they make a lot less. I want no business with them.
And that's, you can leave it there. And this is a very good tactic from Trump. A lot of people don't realize what he's doing there, but Spain is one of the most left-wing progressive countries within the EU. Now, a lot of the countries within Eastern Europe are starting to wake up, and they're voting much more conservative, much more for common sense policies. But for the few remaining holdouts, Trump wants to turn the EU against them, saying, if you want to be on my good side, you better put Spain on the outside and not connect them so in depth to the EU and give them massive benefits. And this is a way to pick them off one by one, because today it's Spain, tomorrow will be the next progressive country and the next progressive country until he's flipped, hopefully, most of the EU. Because the citizens are really helping him at this point. They're waking up themselves.
Yes. But also, Trump disclosed that he says Trump to grant Ukraine a license and teach them how to make Patriot missiles.
A little birdie told me this about the fact that we'll give them the right to make Patriots. We'll show them how to do it. It's very complex, actually, but it's you'll figure out the complexity quickly. And we're talking about that, and the company that makes them, which is building now 4 plants. You know, all of our companies will be able to do this in 2 to 3 months. If you order a Patriot, now you have to wait a long time for them. Same thing with Tomahawks. We have a lot of certain equipment, but with they call it the elite equipment. And you don't need elite equipment necessarily for a war. But so one of the things we're going to be talking about is we're going to give a license to you to make Patriots.
Okay, and leave it there and leave it up there. This is an absolute fantastic policy. A lot of people know I'm pretty much against the Ukraine-Russia war. But the first detachment Trump did there was saying, we're no longer giving billions of dollars. We're no longer going to give free weapons. The EU has to buy it. So that was the first detachment. And that really confined the war, because the EU doesn't have a thriving economy. They can't buy the amount of weapons that Joe Biden was supplying them under. The next thing is going to be, well, we'll show you how to make the missiles. Then it's, you can make your own missiles. We can't give you any more Patriots because we have a conflict in Iran, or we have a conflict over here. And this is one of the good things about kind of having a small conflict going off somewhere else. He has deniability to say, we have no more Patriots. We gave you the patents. We showed you how to make it. You have to make it. You know, we're telling the EU, if they want to build their military, well, build your military. You know how to make the missiles. You have to make the manufacturing centers, and it's going to take them years to build that. So this is a way to confine that war, I believe, overall, and another step for Trump to kind of detach from it. Now, he can't completely detach or shut it down, because I believe a lot of the trade deals that the EU got the short end of the stick with was to keep the United States within NATO and keep them attached to the EU.
Can I take it down now?
Yeah.
Okay. Next, Intel Patriot says, quote, Finland president stuns the world by saying, quote, in the past 2 weeks, we have had more progress ending this war than in the past 3.5 years.
This is pure propaganda. Russia is massively winning the war right now. There was a huge surge within the Ukrainians. I think it was about a week and a half ago to really push. They had some drones that hit, and they blew it way out of proportion. What's happening right now on the ground, Russia's taking more ground than they have in this war. The EU doesn't really know what to do. They need to wait this thing out. Trump was doing multiple meetings with EU leaders. They can't have him think that Ukraine is losing this war right now. I mean, it's pretty obvious they are, but they at least want to make believe like, oh, we're getting close to peace. We're getting close to this. They don't want any of this. They simply want to wait Trump out, and hopefully they get a president in 2028 that's compliant with expanding the war. And you have to remember, and this is the biggest military buildup in modern history. After 2014, NATO, the EU, as well as the United States under Democrat presidents, armed Ukraine to the teeth and completely built massive amounts of trenches, buildings, and bunkers within Ukraine. That's why the war moves so slowly, but it's only moving in one direction.
In the past 2 weeks, we've probably had more progress in ending this war than we have in the past 3.5 years. And I think the fact that we're around this table today is very much symbolic in the sense that it's Team Europe and Team United States helping Ukraine. And the progress that we're looking out of this meeting is about the security guarantees. In the past 2 weeks.
And overall, I mean, even if Europe was able to build up their military, ultimately what a Democratic president or another president might want is for Europe to approach Russia or engage Russia while they engage China. The problem with that is you still have Iran, and Iran is almost impossible to invade. A lot of people don't know the infrastructure of Iran, how mountainous that country is, how little intelligence the United States actually has on Iran. They don't know where to bomb and other things. The United States itself wouldn't be able to appropriately invade Iran, and that's the big weakness here. The alliance between Russia, China, and Iran, it's better just to make peace at this point. The EU would massively benefit from peace negotiations with Russia. They would, again, gain cheap energy, and they could bring their manufacturing back on the back of that. There is a lot of talk in conservative circles within the EU, especially Eastern Europe, to try to repair the relationship with Russia so they can get cheap energy again. And then they wouldn't have to worry about a threat on their eastern border.
I don't know much about this, that's why I let you talk. But if you saw that, there was thunder right behind him. So see, I'm not lying. But lastly, Intel Patriot says, quote, Holy S. Doge reveals the Department of Treasury was spending around $5 trillion a year without any budget codes. They were basically partying on taxpayer money. And Intel Patriot says, I want a refund immediately. And I would too.
Yeah, absolutely. And Canada needs its own Doge. It's obvious at this point.
Yes.
Sure. So actually, a lot of great work at the Treasury this week. One of the crazy things with regards to the Treasury is that when a payment is made, and the computers at the Treasury actually pay about $5 trillion per year, like crazy amounts, there was formerly not a budget code on there. So if a payment was made, you didn't know actually what it was for. Could have been for anything. Yeah. There was a $4 billion COVID fund in the Department of Education, and there was no receipts required, so people could just draw down on it. And when people looked into it, this wasn't us, this was before us, they found that money was being used to rent out Caesar's Palace for parties, rent out stadiums, etc. And so the one change that Doge made with Department of Education is we had the simple requirement that if you draw down money, you must first upload a receipt. That was the only change that was made. You must upload your receipt. And upon doing so, nobody drew down any money anymore.
Yes, but we didn't say that we'd check the receipt. You could send a fake receipt. You could send a picture of your dog. Anything. Anything. But as soon as we asked for anything at all, suddenly the requests were like, oh, we don't need it anymore. Huh, that's interesting.
They were renting Caesar's Palace.
Yes, they were like basically partying on the taxpayer money.
Stadiums.
Yes.
Leasing stadiums.
Leasing stadiums.
For what?
For parties, basically.
For parties.
Yes.
Okay, and you can leave it there. And USAID was the big funding for the Democratic Party, and that's obvious at this point. That's why these midterm elections are going to be much harder, as well as the 2028 election. But this is why you've seen a lot of money being dumped into Ukraine right now. It's the only currently running money laundering scheme that a lot of countries can pump money into, like Canada, who just gave another $900 million, and then can be laundered and funneled into either the midterms or the 2028 election.
But now let's go back into your comments, and then we're heading over to RUM Bailey. Troglodyte says Exxon Valdez was a single hull. Tankers are now double hull, way safer. It's all poppy crock, I'm going to have to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that they are approved to go to the shallow water port only hinders the amount of profit that will be coming out of there.
And Sean says, not to mention, nearly 40 years ago. Exactly. Pete says, the final nail in my Smith support coffin was that hug fest at the mic with Ford. She's gone.
Yeah, she needs to be gone, and people need to realize, just put up a strong candidate, and we control the UCP, so it should be fairly easy to oust her, especially if we keep buying up memberships. We just need to make sure we have a strong candidate like a Keith Wilson that will take over, that can win an election within Alberta, so it won't lead way to an Inchy. We got to make sure it's not a weak candidate there.
Pete says, agree, there are only so many US buttons that you can push. Even Canada, they will eventually push back. And they kind of slowly already are, and Canada's going berserk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if once Alberta gets its independence, the United States doesn't want to take over Alberta or have it be its 51st state. It wants to use it as an example for the rest of the world. What happens if you're ideologically aligned and you're a good trading partner? It would be probably a zero tariff relationship and the economy will boom. What will that do? That will be the example for Greenland, for Panama, for other places in the world. Why do you want to be in a partnership with the United States? Not just economically, but also ideologically, meaning Western values, traditional Western values. Alberta has all that, and I think the United States will use it as the example of what a good trade relationship looks like with the United States going forward with the golden age within the Western Hemisphere, which Trump constantly talks about.
Sean says Spanish Prime Minister naturalized all those people in order to vote for him. Exactly.
Yeah.
They didn't try to fake it to be anything else other than naked politics. Exactly. And when he got called out on it, he said, well, yeah, they like me. Pete says, love Spain. I really don't like Spain. Had a sister living there for 20 years, but they've always been nutty. Now they're hostile to tourists from anywhere. The problem is Spain thinks it's similar to Canada in a way where it's self-important and thinks it's way better than it actually is and that it doesn't have any issues and that the rest of the world is worse off than they are.
They have they have a real elitist attitude because they used to be the economic center of the world and they still think they're living in that age, which isn't the case. They also have independence movements though, so they're very progressive federal government, I guess you would call it. But there has been multiple independence movements within Spain, like Catalonia.
Bit different, but Sean says Spain was a fascist dictatorship a little over 40 years ago, just saying. Exactly. Still keep some of those tendencies. Sean says give them a trophy and kick them out of NATO. They are a fairly new addition to NATO in the 80s, not an original signatory like Portugal, a stronger historic U.S. ally.
Spain's a real problem because Africa is right there. That's where all these Africans are immigrating into Spain and then into the rest of the EU. And they don't stay in Spain. They want to go to Ireland. They want to go to the UK. They want to go into these countries where they're getting free housing, free money, free dental, and free laundry, I heard today.
Pete says,
I was watching that Rupert Lowe interview and he was telling Joe Rogan, oh yeah, they get free laundry and they get free dental and UK citizens don't even get free dental and free education as well. It's crazy.
Pete says, have you guys heard of the big pipeline that's going from Russia to China?
Yeah, and they should be building that at absolute breakneck speed. A lot of that's going through rail right now while they convert, but most of Russia's infrastructure, because they always wanted to be part of Europe. That was the big secret. Europe didn't want them, and they treated them like shit for so long. Now they're having to go to China because Biden kind of forced them into this relationship by putting Europe against them, putting America against them. They never wanted China to be their main partner, but at this point, I don't think they have another choice. They were still holding out hopes for the United States, but I just don't think it's going to happen at this point.
Let's wait to see if there was lightning behind you. Pete says the project was revealed talking about the same thing. The project was revealed a couple of days ago. So much for Canada shipping to China and so much for Russia running out of money.
Oh, yeah, absolutely not. And that relationship was forged because of Joe Biden. It should have been a divide and conquer strategy or just a divide and friendship strategy. Russia and China could have been easily split apart. A lot of their infrastructure is in the West to Europe. They should have had good negotiations with the EU. The EU has had documents coming out for over 15 years now about invasion plans for Russia. That has always been the plan. They have maps on how they wanted to divide Russia up and give it to different regions, to different countries and things like that. $79 trillion worth. I mean, this is why they weaponized Ukraine over a decade. It was one of the biggest military buildups in modern history.
Pete says, that's how we used to learn not to blow up ourselves in preschool. No idea what that means. Oh, that and potato guns. Pete says, broadcast manage fuel. Please do say more. Pete says, thing is, if you believed in the jibby jab era 3 months after it originated, we are not on the same line. And some people still believe in that BS. I still see people with masks and the ones from that era.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the big question that we're looking at in this Alberta independence, whether it's the binding or non-binding referendum. Is there a critical mass of people still in Alberta? Because in national Canada, there's not enough to win a Conservative election, I believe, at this point. So many people are fleeing every year, mainly Conservatives, and they're fleeing to the United States as well as Mexico and other countries. Alberta, I think there's still a critical mass of individuals. Number one, you voted Conservative for the last 93 years, so you already had the most densely packed province of Conservatives in Canada. I think you still hold that critical mass, but that's what the vote is really on.
Mm-hmm. John Odds, hello, says, this is why they picked the German subs leading up to the announcement of subs. All the media was saying Korea's deal was better. Carney's choice was for himself and his buddies.
Yeah, I don't know why they picked the German subs. There was a sub deal going on, like a secondary deal going on with the Koreans where Brookfield would have actually gained. So I thought the Koreans had an advantage with that. Obviously, some deal was cut in the background, but that should have been put on the table to renew the USMCA with a bunch of other things. But Carney's obviously trying to sabotage that at this point.
Southern Gem Phil says, yes, work with us. I'm guessing the US. Where are we? John Odd says...
And I still think the best strategy is try to divide China from Russia by repairing relations with Russia. Putin is fairly moderate compared to everybody else within Russia. It's possible to do. Europe would massively benefit. They could get their manufacturing back through cheap oil as well, and it would make China a whole lot weaker. It would also weaken Iran. Right now, with those three countries together, and as more military action happens within Russia, happens in Iran, they're realizing that alliance is absolutely imperative to their future. So if you can't repair relations with Russia now, you're not going to be able to do it in the future. Now is the time to kind of take the shot to do it.
Sorry, John Out says, why would Carney... Oh, I read that one. Hold on, where were we? Found another one. John Out says, if we didn't have so much inner red tape, we could supply Europe with energy.
Yeah.
And yet. Well,
no, that was...
Okay. Southern Gem Phil says... Oh, no, they're fighting amongst each other. Sean says...
Well, and here's the other thing. Like, Russia would be supplying Europe with energy. They did for decades. They did it at a very cheap rate, and they had great manufacturing. And they have landline and land pipelines. The Nord Stream 2 pipeline was only one pipeline that got blown up. There's multiple other pipelines that still exist to this day.
Charlotte asks, what happened to those Brit diesel subs we bought? LOL.
Oh, I don't know. But the Brits are in major need to repair their naval fleet as well as their submarine fleet. They're not
doing well.
They're not doing as well as they used to be.
Sean says, it's so easy to divide China and Russia. They are natural enemies, always have been. And yet we pushed them together.
If you just look at their history, they're natural enemies. But the way we've pushed them together, they're almost attached at the hip now. It's going to be hard to separate them. Russia's actually going to have to believe there's a long-lasting relationship to be had to invest within not only Europe, but the United States as well. If it looks like it's just temporary or... they still want to go to war with them. Russia's not going to invest in that because they got a reliable partner within China right now, but they don't want that. China also has invasion plans for Russia. Their invasion plan was very interesting when I read over it. What their invasion plan was just to have 1 million refugees a day walk over the border so it would absolutely flood Russia. And that seems like the invasion plan that actually got implemented on the United States and the EU.
All over the place.
But not from China, from other countries.
Yes. But now let's go to RUMBLE. Thank you so much for being here with us on YouTube. The next stories that we're going to talk about are a little bit too spicy for YouTube, so they're exclusive for RUMBLE. Before you head over there with us, please don't forget to subscribe because, again, it really does help us out. Let's go.